Hello and welcome to Unstress. I'm Dr Ron Ehrlich. Now, today's episode is going to challenge you. We're always talking about food and exercise and sleep, and it's obviously very important. However, I'm not going to spoil it. My guest today is Jason Bawden-Smith, and Jason's background, as you'll hear, is environmental science. So he's an entrepreneur, he's an author, he's a speaker, but he also had his own health challenges, and I won't spoil that either because he'll share that with you. But today's episode will certainly challenge you. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Jason Bawden-Smith. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you, Ron. What a pleasure and honour to be invited on this tremendous show of yours on Unstress. I listened to a few episodes. I love them all and can't wait to dive deep into the topic today.
Great. Well, there are so many things that I've been looking forward to talking to you about, and there's quite a few things that we're going to cover that I think some of our listeners may find surprising, confronting, enlightening. But I wondered if you might just share with us a bit about your own journey that's brought you to this point.
Sure. My interest on the environmental impact on human health started as a teenager when I was swimming in what were then heavily contaminated oceans in Sydney. This is now we're talking in the early and mid-'80s, where we literally swam in effluent. When particular winds came, they blew these untreated sewage from the sewage treatment plants, and I unfortunately got a severe ear infection, which ruined my balance and prevented me from being a decent surfer. I was never going to be a great surfer, but it's nothing like getting a severe ear infection to motivate you. And I remember coming home one day and my mother said, "Why did you have a half an hour long shower?" And I said, "Well, I was swimming in shit and I wanted to get it all off me." And I started complaining and whining and carrying on. And she looked me square in the eye and said, "Well, you know how to fix it. Go and fix it." And I went, "What? How am I going to do that?" But mothers have a great way of influencing you. And I spent the next 10 years working on that issue, led me to an applied science degree in environmental health. There were no environmental degrees in the mid to late 80s. It's one of the very first ones. Now they're everywhere. From there, I worked at New South Wales Department of Health, where I worked on the water pollution issue. And then once that was solved, moved into more toxicology orientated. Childhood lead poisoning was my major for my master's thesis, which was awarded a university prize and made all the media pretty much across Australia and got me in a whole host of problems because I was coming out saying it was lead paint. And while we had lead petrol back in those days, it was giving a little bit to everybody. It wasn't the source of the actual childhood lead poisonings or the amount of animals that were dying from lead poisoning. So that was my master's degree, and I left health to go to academia. I started a PhD, again on more lead research. I didn't like it, and the consultancy business was picking up because everyone wanted their house inspected. And I suppose I was doing building, what we call building biology these days, way back then. And it led into a environmental company, which is now the largest contaminated land consultancy company in Australia, called JBS&G. I'm very proud of that. It's mainly my partners and staff that have done all the work. But, yeah, we have around 200 staff running around Australia, cleaning up the most contaminated sites and, hopefully doing a great service for humanity and this country. And I know a lot about chemicals. I've spent my whole life looking at the impact of the environment on human health, and I was very surprised to find out what happened after I got sick.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, I grew up too in Bondi, and I do remember some of those shots, the aerial shots, which would show that brown, God, dare I even talk about it, just so unbelievable that we would allow that, but a big brown effluent, and depending on the tides and the currents and the winds. And of course, lead is a big one, isn't it? I mean, talk about public health. I mean, we could diverge here and talk about lead, because I'm actually quite fascinated in that as a public health issue and the way that was swept under the carpet right from the beginning.
Maybe we'll do another show on
another show. There's too much to talk about.
All the goss. I was in the middle of all that. Yeah. That story.
And then, of course, contaminated sites. Well, I wish I could say you must be running out of business, but I can imagine that business is actually booming. That's a sad comment. But here we are now. We're talking about different things today, and I know that you have three. I've heard you speak about 3 foundational pillars. And I wondered if you might share that with our listeners, what they are. Maybe
I will. What I'd like to do, Ron, is just take a step back and explain how I came to that knowledge.
Yes.
Because I was, classically trained, if we're using musical terminology, and biochemistry and nuclear DNA were the focus of all my training at university. And it wasn't until I got very sick and I had 20 chronic diseases. And I tried everything to get better, and we won't go through all that, but let's just say from the Macquarie Street specialists through all the alternate practitioners all the way to kind of energetic healing, and I couldn't get better. And in kind of letting go and thinking, all right, I'm in big trouble here, I may die, I'll just have to accept that, I got an inspiration to look at biology and physics when I was meditating at the beach in around 2015. And I started doing the normal internet search that you do, and I stumbled across a neurosurgeon called Dr. Jack Kruse and listened to one of his talks, and we just went, oh, my goodness, this is a whole different approach. And I knew nothing about it. Now, instantly, I called BS. Like, I've been studying the impacts of the environment on human health for nearly 3 decades. How didn't I know about this? Come on.
Yeah.
Like, this has got to be, this can't be true. But it's coming from a neurosurgeon, right? The top of the pops in the medical field. So I said, all right, I'm desperate. Let's just try it. And I have this takeaway line that all you need to do is go to the beach and eat oysters. And I said, wow, I can do that. Now it's a little bit more involved, and we'll get into that now. So the principles of biophysics is the 3 pillars you talked about are light, mainly sunlight, water, and magnetism. Now, we'll probably go through each one specifically, but before we get into that, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but why are they the foundational pillars rather than food, exercise, nutrition, and vitamins and supplements and all those things? The reason is that we were never told at school or at university about the importance of a second DNA that we have in our body. We all know about the double helix DNA, but what we weren't talked about was mitochondria. Now, most people know mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and they create energy, but they don't understand the depth of mitochondria. They have no clue that maybe up to 10 to 15% of your whole body weight is due to mitochondria. There are thousands of mitochondria in every brain and heart cell. There are less in your little toe, which doesn't need a lot of energy, but they're everywhere. And you only get this genome from your mother, not from both parents. It's a total separate genome. And Professor Doug Wallace is the guy to look up if you want to understand. He's the world international expert on mitochondria, and he's come up with a theory of aging called heteroplasmy, which in really basic terms is the number of mitochondria that become dysfunctional eventually lead to death. So it's a gradual natural process that happens. But there are many things in life that you can do to, prevent it from becoming dysfunctional. Unfortunately, we're doing the opposite and making them become more dysfunctional. And he claims that 85 to 90% of all chronic disease is related to mitochondrial dysfunction. Dr. Kruse would say it's closer to 95, even 99%. So you sit back and go, whoa, hang on.
Yeah, that's
this
a big one.
This is a whole new approach.
That's a big one.
And, I'm still calling BS on all this stuff, right? So I started implementing these 3 pillars of foundational health. And I couldn't believe it.
It kind of, in many ways, when you think about it, we need, if you look around your house and you look at all the little appliances or anything you use, you need power to make them functional. Otherwise, they're literally just a piece of junk. And yet this is what might remind us about, go back a little step here and just give us, because you've said that and you've Mitochondria 101. Mitochondria 101, Jason. Go on.
Okay. So they are essentially an organelle that sit in every cell except for red blood cells. And there's a good reason why they don't, but we won't go into that. So,
no, come on. I'm actually fascinated by that because, we talk about the number of the number of cells in the body, but it depends on whether you include those with DNA or with not. Red blood cells don't have mitochondria in them.
And they don't have normal DNA either.
They don't have nucleus in them. They're just really, they're transport molecules, aren't they?
They're carriers of, a lot of people say they're carriers of oxygen and carrying of energy, but it's actually information as well. We really haven't understood quantum biology, which is the study of biophysics, and they actually carry a lot of information around the body, and that's how cells communicate. So they're critical. But 101 mitochondria they are 4 complexes that basically channel electrons. So a lot of people talk about, it's the fat you eat, it's the proteins, it's the carbohydrates. Well, if you break it down to a quantum level, it's actually electrons, and it's called the electron chain transport. So the mitochondria take in electrons and carry it through these complexes. Lots of interactions happen between all these different complexes, which we won't get in today because we're doing 101 mitochondria, not advanced mitochondria. Yes. And that eventually leads to this nanomotor, where ATP, which is the energy currency of the body, is produced. Now, I would say ATP is not the most important function for mitochondria, and that shocks a lot of people. I believe now that it's actually the creation of a special water. And this water, Dr. Jared Pollack is the researcher who first kind of came out with this easy water. It's a 4th phase of water. It's not liquid. It's not gas. It's not like ice. It's a jelly. It's a different phase of water. And there's a lot of work coming out around that water, which forms the cytosol. All the water in your cell is made of this water, and it carries a charge. It does a lot of signaling. And if your mitochondria aren't making that water, then you get intracellular dehydration, and that just causes a lot of problems. So it's not just energy. This special water, which is low in deuterium, and this may be beyond 101 mitochondria, is critical. And it's going to be a big buzzword in the health industry over coming years, deuterium.
And deuterium is a different form of hydrogen.
Correct. It's an isotope. There's 3 isotopes of hydrogen. Deuterium is a stable, non-radioactive isotope of hydrogen. Basically, it's twice the mass and twice the size of hydrogen, the normal proton of hydrogen. And if you have too much deuterium coming into your cell, then it doesn't. The hydrogen, which is used to power the motor, so this little nanomotor that generates the ATP runs at, I think it's like 8,000 revs per minute. Like it's redlining your car. It really spins hard. And it uses hydrogen as well, not just electrons to spin. And if the hydrogen doesn't get in because it's blocked by the fat deuterium, then you have mitochondrial dysfunction, which is a cause of disease.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Jason. I always said that if I had a choice of what I would go back and study now, I wouldn't do a PhD. I'd go back and study. I used to say, I may change that today, but I used to say I'd go back and study biochemistry, anatomy, and physiology. But I think I need to go one step further back and include biology and physics and biochemistry and leave the anatomy and physiology for the moment. I'm seeing where I'm heading here. So just to recap, the mitochondria are not just producing energy, ATP, but it's a whole electron transport system. And we remembered that from second year biochemistry, that we learnt all those things, and thank God we got out of the second year, because once we learnt that, we never had to think about it again.
I'll tell you a funny joke. I used to go out with a doctor in training, and she woke up in the middle of the night, like nightmare, screaming. And I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" She said, "I had nightmares about all the biochemical equations I have to learn for mitochondria."
Yep.
That was so funny.
Yeah, and part of that process of the mitochondria is this production of this water, which is so critical to cellular health.
Totally. Like that water, like we are water beings. We're on a water planet. We keep forgetting how important hydration, and it's not the water you drink, it's the water you make. And I'm supposed to be this water expert of Australia, and I didn't know that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, because we're only talking 2015, so this has been a little bit of a revelation, not a little bit, probably
Massive.
One of the biggest in your entire academic and personal life.
Well, it saved my life. It's even deeper than that. I think if I didn't learn this knowledge, either the cancer or the heart disease or one of the chronic conditions I had probably would have taken me by now.
Yeah.
And understanding what mitochondria are for the whole holistic body, and I know you're the holistic thing, they're basically environmental sensors.
Yeah.
So they're sensing the environment in which you are putting your biology. And we've forgotten for some reason that for millions of years we've evolved pretty much naked in the middle of the bush in natural frequencies. And it's only in the last few hundred years that we decided to put clothes on, build these houses, put air conditioning in, and live. I think the US EPA are now saying 95 to 97% of average American person's total life is spent indoors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's another one, isn't it? The other pillar that you were talking, and I don't think we've probably finished on water. We can come back to that. But the other one is sunlight. And I've often felt there was an interesting thing, isn't it? We've acknowledged that without sunlight, we are literally nothing. And yet there it is, 93 million miles away, but we have to protect ourselves from it. And I always had a little bit of a problem with that one. And yet, and we're going to talk about this too, the EMF stuff, no problem at all.
Exactly.
Carry it around with you in your pocket, put it on your lap next to your ovaries and testicles, and put it on your brain and put it next to your bed. Go on, tell us about another pillar.
Right, so we'll jump into light.
We'll come back to water, because I just want to get a kind of an overview and then dive into the water a bit more.
So, I've got skin in the game on this one. The audience can't see, but I have a scar running through the bottom of my lip, halfway up the side of my cheek. I lost a third of my bottom lip because I had a squamous cell carcinoma that was starting to metastasize, and I had to go in for surgery in 2016 to have it removed. I have some graphic photos for those who want to see it. So I had a skin cancer on my lip that required massive surgery. Thank goodness I had a great surgeon, because there was a chance I wouldn't speak again. That's how much of my face was ripped off. And I had what we thought was a BCC, a basal cell carcinoma, on my shoulder that we never tested. And then I came out and it's a big Zorro Z. And I went, "Why did you cut so much of my shoulder out?" And he said, "We think it could have been a melanoma." Now, I can't say that for fact because we never tested it, but I had real skin cancer and required surgery. So I was told throughout that whole process, when I was getting it all tested and surgery and even going into the anesthesia room, which is a horrifying experience, he's saying, "Oh, geez, you must have played a lot of cricket when you were a kid and, all that surfing you did when you were young." And I'm sitting there going, literally before I'm about to get my face cut off, going, how could something I did 25, 30 years ago be responsible for what I've got now? It didn't quite add up for me. So I dove into where is the source that UV causes cancer? Where does that come from? Because no one can tell you. And it was actually a book by John Ott. I think it's called
John?
OTT. John Ott. I think it's called Light and Health. And he traced it back to where they were doing studies on mice, researching jaundice. Some babies are born with jaundice, and in the old days they put them in the sunlight, but today they put them under these blue lights to try and recover from this jaundice issue through the liver. And the original study done on mice, they used UV lamps. So that wasn't natural sunlight. It was just big UV lamps, and it caused eye cancer in the mice. So they said, right, UV causes cancer, and that started the meme way back in the 50s, or maybe earlier, that UV caused cancer. Now they said, oh, well, the sun has cancer. Has UV light, so the sun must cause cancer. And if you really look at the studies properly and the study design, the evidence is very, very weak that sunlight causes any skin cancer. And in fact, the great studies, the really good studies done mainly out of Sweden, are showing that sunlight equals less morbidity and mortality across all disease spectrum. And now, so the more sun you have, the healthier you're going to be and the less disease you're going to have. And now you're seeing a lot of doctors coming out saying vitamin D levels are really a proxy for if and when you may get cancer. And the only real way to make proper sulfated vitamin D in your body is through sunlight. You can't do it by taking a pill. Mm-hmm. You can increase your vitamin D, but it causes calcium issues that get into your artery, and that's a segue to EMF, but that's another story. So the frequencies that we were biologically designed to be in are sunlight, the natural grounding. Some people call it earthing, bare feet on the ground. These are free electrons that we get from Mother Nature, and we don't take our shoes off and stand on the ground anymore unless we're going to the beach. So they're the main frequencies. Sure, the plants, the animals, they were all involved, but the primary two frequencies, the DC electricity from the sun, remember that, direct current, not the alternate current we use in our houses. That was problem number one, where we moved from natural frequencies to artificial frequencies. As much as people love Tesla, he is probably, he's one of the major causes of more disease and death than, I'm not going to say, but all those evil dictators that have caused so many strife over the centuries. It really is a big problem using the wrong electricity. Then we moved inside, so we're not grounding anymore, and we put all these artificial frequencies around us. We started with the light bulb. Originally, we only had campfire and candles. And if you have a look at the spectrum of those, there's a lot of red light. Red light is the healing part of the sun. Now, UV can be dangerous if you have too much of it, and too much of a good thing can be bad for you. So you don't want to get burnt in the sun. But UV is critical for vitamin D and a whole host of other biological processes. But the red light and near infrared light is really important. And I won't go through all the phases of our light technology, but we were brought up, you and I, Ron, were brought up with incandescent bulbs. They're the ones that were hot if we touched them. Mm-hmm. The reason they were hot was all that red light. So the incandescent bulbs were more reflective of the natural sunlight than the current lights we have now. The LEDs, the halogens, the fluorescent lights. We got rid of all the red because it wastes energy. All that heat was wasted. So we decided, because we didn't understand quantum biology, that I will just have the ones that cause actual white light, the bright white light. And those frequencies, unfortunately, are specifically, I shouldn't say that. They were designed for luminous, lux, brightness, but they're the same exact frequencies that melanopsin, which is a photoreceptor that resides not just in our eye but throughout our whole skin, in the subcutaneous layers of our fat. They are the frequencies that destroy melanopsin.
Wow.
Now, and
Okay.
it's unbelievable. And melanopsin is what you need to make melatonin and all those hormones. And if you get vitamin A gets released, retinol gets released once the melanopsin is destroyed, and that vitamin A runs around destroying every other photoreceptor in your body. And it's just causing havoc. And that's a biophysical quantum biology pathway that no one's talking about. And it's something that I know poisoned me because I was blue light toxic. That's for sure. It wasn't EMF that got me, but that's the next frequency we brought in, and maybe that's a good segue. If I'm talking too much, Ron.
No. Well, I'm just kind of writing things down here, Jason, and trying to keep up with my head going ahead of my hand, because this whole, I go back to Einstein. I said this at a talk I gave last week. I said Einstein said that every atom in the universe is both energy and matter, which means every atom in our body is both energy and matter. And if we ignore that fact, which is easy to do because, hey, go and try and explain quantum physics to someone, and it's much easier to explain Newtonian physics. Even that's not easy. But if we ignore that, that's just kind of it's naive at the very least. At the very best, it's naive. And it's actually negligent at the very worst. And so this whole thing about electron transfer, which is quantum physics at an atomical level, this whole thing about light, the right frequencies of light that we have evolved with to this point after millions of years, and the way we have intervened with this, and we're always kind of, in these public health messages, we're always kind of, nature is bad and dangerous, stay out, get inside and get all snuggled into your home and seal it off. Anyway, no, I'm still with you. Just back onto the melanopsin. Tell us, go back a little bit there, because the melanopsin's obviously important. It's a precursor to melatonin, and it's present in the surface of the skin and the eyes.
And the eye and parts of your liver as well. So we didn't know, and I give the credit here to Jack Kruse, because he's the guy putting the puzzles together. He's not an originator. He doesn't publish papers, but he understands the quantum mechanics and medicine to us the hardest degrees you'll ever do and bring it together. And he thought it was neuropsin that was going to be the culprit, because of other studies which I won't go in today. And when we found out it was melanopsin, holy moly, now we know that's in our eyes. Guess what we use to see light? Our eyes. Guess what we see with our iPhone and our computer and our television, all using our eyes. And then we found out I think it was only 2018, that it's actually in our skin as well.
Wow.
So now we know if we expose ourselves to these artificial frequencies, particularly through, getting technical here, between 435 and 485 nanometers are the really, really bad ones for melanopsin. Some people will say up to 550, especially at night. But they are the frequencies that these lights that we're using today are designed at. We got rid of all the other frequencies and just put the ones that destroy our melanopsin. So now we've found the pathway, and all the critics and all the skeptics and all the people out there are saying, Jason, you're just full of it. You can't prove this. You can't do that. Well, I'm sorry. We now have it, and I can, maybe in the show notes, we can put some links to some YouTube videos, because it's quite detailed, and I don't want to lose the audience because we've got other things to talk about today. But I'll give you the links, and we can.
But essentially, for our audience and for me, to be honest, because hey, this podcast is so self-indulgent, Jason. I get an education while I'm talking to people. Melanopsin is the precursor to melatonin, and these bad light sources of LED, halogen, fluorescent, which we flood out, and I presume also the light from computers and iPhones and all of that, destroy the melanopsin, which doesn't allow the melatonin to...
It was not just melatonin. So the melanopsin, once that's destroyed, you get this interaction with vitamin A with retinol in your blood, and that releases aldehydes, these kind of chemicals that run around the body destroying all your other photoreceptors. And that has a dramatic impact on all your hormones, all your bodily functions. So melatonin is one of the critical ones because it's pretty much that and leptin are the kind of master hormones that really, we need to talk about, well, not talk about, but know about in terms of getting great health, because melatonin is not just the sleep hormone. Most people think melatonin is made at night. Well, it's not. It's made in the morning, and it's made by looking at sunrise. We talked about light before, and I know we're going to finish the show with the tips that people can use. The number one tip is to see every sunrise. If you see every second sunrise for the rest of your life, the chances of getting a chronic disease is next to zero.
Wow.
That's according to Jack Kruse, not me, because I don't diagnose or treat anyone. I'm the environmental guy.
Yeah. That's a big statement, though.
It's a massive statement, and I couldn't make it, but he can, because he's the neurosurgeon.
Well, let's talk about melatonin, because you had touched on earlier about the importance of mitochondria, and as you say, most people think melatonin. Well, I'll just take, particularly if you've had jet lag and you're particularly aware of it, you might take it an hour or so before you go to bed. But it's far more complicated than that. I mean, I know there's a 400-page textbook on melatonin, the master hormone, and you've mentioned leptin as well, which I'd love to talk about. Let's talk about melatonin and some of its more important functions.
So I'm not an expert in melatonin. I try not to talk too much about diagnosis and treatment because I'm the environmental guy. But the most important thing to understand with melatonin is it's made in the morning, and it's only released after 3 to 4 hours of complete darkness. That's why people think it's made at night. No, it's released at night. So that's why we recommend a sleep sanctuary, which is total blackout. And we'll get to EMFs in a minute. Because if your melatonin is not working, it's the hormone that's going to basically control apoptosis and autophagy. So this is cell repair and cell death processing. And every day we've got cells that aren't working very well, that need to be repaired or be replaced. And we do that primarily at night. And if our melatonin is not working well, then those natural clearing processes of autophagy and apoptosis do not work. So, sleep is something we really need to talk about, because without good quality sleep, you cannot make melatonin, and therefore you are much more prone to serious disease.
And I think I had also heard, because I had listened to Jack Kruse talking, and I'm hoping to get him on to discuss this too, but I know he had mentioned, I think I got this right, that it's also a very important part of regulating mitochondria.
Oh, totally. It's its main job.
Yep.
Sorry, I should have mentioned.
No, that's fine. I look, my head is spinning, Jason. Now listen, EMF. Let's talk about that, because we're surrounded by it. What do you think?
So electromagnetic frequencies are wonderful, right? Without them, you wouldn't be alive today. So we need to understand there are good EMFs and there are bad EMFs. It's a spectrum. It goes from DC, which is the sun, the plants, us. We all work on this direct current, and it steps up. So it goes through what we call non-ionizing radiation, which is frequencies that are used for radar, AMF radio, the cell towers, our mobile phones, and the new range of Internet of Things, and the heavier frequencies that are planned for 5G and the rollout. Then we get to the normal spectrum of light, which is sunlight. So sunlight is an EMF. So don't think all EMFs are bad. And then as the frequencies just get really, really going high energy up and down, we're into ionizing radiation, which is your X-rays, your gamma rays, your cosmic rays. Now, the number one thing and why we have such a problem today is, and I'm not going to talk about corruption and fraud because it is so bad and so horrific that once you realize how bad it is, it's 100 times worse. But let's just say there were people on this planet that purposely had a meme. That meme was, if it's not ionizing, if the energy levels aren't high enough, it is totally safe. Now, they never mentioned the word safe, which is very interesting because they understand liability. But I went back and I wrote a book called In the Dark, and we'll put a link on the show notes as well because there's I want to give it away. I want people to really understand this. So I have a link. It is a PDF. I'd rather you print it out and read it than read it on the screen.
Yes.
And we can talk about the blue blocking glasses that I'm wearing today that help you if you do want to watch it on a screen. And I summarize a lot of information in there. Most people don't know about this book because I was told to shut up once it was published. And that's another story. Anyway, so the non-ionizing part of the spectrum the health effects have been hushed up. You can dig up US Navy reports that were released recently, date back to 1972, that clearly show effects across a broad spectrum of biological impacts. You can read a book by probably the best one is called Going Somewhere, and the name's it was Andrew Marino, Dr. Andrew Marino. He worked under Robert O. Becker, one of the famous
Body Electric. He did that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he was his right-hand man, and he's actually the only guy that did 50 years continuous research on EMF. And he went from being the biologist scientist over to becoming a lawyer to understand how this whole system works. So if you don't believe EMF is an issue, you read Going Somewhere, then talk to me. So the data has been in for a long, long time. It's just been hushed up, and we won't go through how they did it, but it's quite genius. But the number one meme they put out there was, it's not ionizing, so therefore it's safe. Now, our engineers are brilliant, and they've been told that all these frequencies, as long as they're less than the non-ionizing, from the megahertz to the gigahertz range, right down to the lower hertz, if they're fine, what can we build? What gadgets can we come up with to help us with productivity, efficiency, entertainment? And they've gone nuts because they were told that they could use these frequencies. So I don't blame the engineers for all this technology. In fact, I'm a technology addict. In fact, we're all addicts.
Yep.
We may be highly functioning addicts, but we're all addicts.
Yep.
And we need to understand this is a drug. This has been purposely designed. And, you can go back to all the patterns that Google has to keep you entrained, to keep you on these things, the way they design the like systems on Facebook, on Snapchat, and all these apps. You see the kids today, you see the adults today, drive past every bus stop on the way to work or the way to the shops. Everyone's staring at a screen. No one's talking anymore. It's actually more addictive than cocaine and heroin.
And it's interesting, Jason, just to digress there for a moment, isn't it? But for those of us that were old enough to grow up at a time when that wasn't the case, there were certain patterns of behaviour and thinking that were ingrained. But for those kids that were, say, 10 years when 2007 came along and social media and that whole thing started, and they were really important times in development, they are suffering serious mental health issues. Mental health issues.
Horrific. The reason I'm coming out and speaking more openly after I was told to shut up is, and these are true stories. So what is the number one cancer killer in children today? You probably know this. It's glioblastoma. These are brain tumours.
Brain tumours, yep.
When we were kids, there was no such thing as a brain tumour. There was leukemia, which is linked to the AC electrical power grid, which everyone forgot about, but there wasn't brain tumours. Now, my nephew's classmate died last year of a glioblastoma, age 7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is hitting me, hitting my family.
Yep.
One of my best mining mates, I worked a lot in the mining industry as an environmental guy, he died 2 years ago of a glioblastoma. Now, you like the chances of surviving glioblastoma, I think it's less than 2%. You really got 12 months to live once you're diagnosed. So these brain tumors in kids has got me motivated to actually say enough's enough. And then when you talk about mental health, like there was a young lass who committed suicide at my daughter's school. It was horrific. It shocked.
Well, we've done a program, Jason, with Jodie Lowinger last year,
Right.
Sydney Anxiety Clinic, and she shared a statistic that shocked me, but it's now quite well known, is that 1 in 4 kids under the age of 18 are being diagnosed with anxiety and or depression. And that's who being diagnosed. And cutting and, the whole thing is just... It's
self-harm.
Yeah, self-harm. And as you say, you look in any public space and you see how people are interacting or not with each other. I mean, this is not only an electromagnetic assault on our society, but an actual relationship assault. The way we relate to each other. But anyway, we digress for a moment. But go on.
Well, no,
it's all part of it. It's important.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Like I always say to people, what's the number one cause of death in 15 to 25-year-olds? And the standard answer's like car accidents, because everyone thinks they're Peter Brock when they get their license and they drive crazy like I used to. But it's suicide.
Yep.
Right? What the hell happens?
Yep.
So I agree with you. The whole mental health area is, and I think it's all about disconnection.
Yeah.
I think this technology, this indoor living, is disconnecting us from nature, it's disconnecting it from the family, and disconnecting most importantly, from ourselves. And I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But anyway, let's go on. We were talking about this EMF and we'll get on to 5G, but the EMF radiation, and I started the conversation by saying we're surrounded by it, and what do you think? Well, you've given us that kind of the electromagnetic spectrum, and of course the whole issue with public health messages is that it's a story that is very easy to miss, but once you hear it, it is very difficult to ignore.
The reason I'm hesitating is I don't want to put anyone to a state of fear.
No.
I'm a solution-focused guy.
Yep.
So what I'm about to tell you is real. It is happening, and you need to know. So we have RF spectrum analyzers. These are sophisticated professional instruments that tell you what's going on in the amount of frequencies being used around us every day. And the frequencies now are saturated. It used to be like a finger, like it was little sticks, so you had lots of gaps. Now it's blanked out. So we have now saturated this spectrum from low megahertz up to mid-band gigahertz that is continually just pulsating frequencies at us. It's like Chinese water torture for our mitochondria and our biology. Tap, 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 tap. We can't hear it, we can't feel it, but our mitochondria and our body can. And I run around with a little, we call it the Mito meter. It's a tiny little EMF meter. It's reasonably priced, and it costs about $200. And I've been testing around my local community now, and I live in Sydney, not far from where you live, Ron.
Yep.
And I try not to go out as much as I used to. We've gone to extreme levels at our beaches, at your beach and my beach, and I won't mention names, but those who know where Ron and I live, we're in Sydney on the beaches.
That's okay. I don't mind. We're talking. I mean, most of the beaches have got Wi-Fi, but one or two haven't they?
They have got cells now. If you have a look at the cell towers, they've all changed the antennas. So the power density and the number of antennas have been dramatically increased. So the background radiation just walking along the beach these days is at extreme levels. So I go around testing so I can find a place to do the sunrise that's not irradiating me. And I'm not going to tell everyone because everyone will come down there and join me. And then I've got a surfing beach I go to, which I know is low in frequencies. And, you can work this out and maybe I'll share it one day, but no, not today. So you've got to buy these meters to find out what's going on. I was sitting at a cafe down the road and Trina said, I can see a cell tower, line of sight. It was a few hundred meters away. And I know what that reading is. And she challenged me. Trina's my wife. And she challenged me. And I said, it'll be 1 red on the mitometer. I won't go into all the units to confuse people. And I said, look, the meter's in the car. Go and get it. So she did because whoever won this bet had to pay the bill. And she lost because I know if you've got direct line of sight with a cell tower from where you're sitting, so all the penthouses, all the ones with glass overlooking the grand views of the harbour and the beaches, if you've got a line of sight with a cell tower, you've got extreme levels of radiation coming into your house because glass doesn't do anything to block it. Now, concrete does. And the only way to do this is to measure. And that's why I love these little mitometers so much because I need to know what's going on because if this stuff – and it's it's like smoking. Now, you're not going to die tomorrow, but you have enough cigarettes, eventually it's going to get you. And it's very similar, and I'm very careful now where I go, where I eat. If I go to a cafe, I sit right at the back, away from the views, because I know I'm protected from the concrete. And I try and go out when there's not so many people at the cafe because they're all on their bloody cell phones and they're all emitting as well. So it's a management issue. It's getting to a point now where I'm seriously looking at relocating. Because when we roll out the 5G network, which won't officially be for a couple of years now, there's some trial plants in the city areas like George Street or in Melbourne along Collins Street. They're starting to trial it out. But it'll go, if they let them do it, it'll go ballistic in 2021, 2022. And if these small cells roll out across our neighbourhood, then I have to move.
Let's just explain a little bit to our listener because it's easy to use the term 5G and as though everyone knows what we're talking about, and I don't even pretend to know what I'm talking about. I do know that when I put my house in, I had stuff blue cabled everywhere. The guy wanted to put in the speakers. He said, I'll put in Wi-Fi speakers for you. I went, no, you won't. You'll put cables in. But I still do have Wi-Fi in my house. And I noticed, I know I won't, I'm about to change all that, but I noticed when they put it in 3 or 4 years ago, I already saw the Wi-Fi signal coming up for 5G. I had an alternative of 4G, which wasn't, it was just the Wi-Fi signal and then a little dash next to it saying 5G.
Okay.
I've looked ominously at that.
So this is a great way to confuse the public, and I think it's done intentionally. So the two Wi-Fi frequencies they use are 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. They are not 5G. They are like 5G is very confusing, and I don't want to go through everything with the audience, but there's like 5 different technologies that come together to make up the 5th generation. Right. This has got nothing to do with gigahertz. This is all about generation of technology. And one of those technologies is millimeter waves. Now, millimeter waves don't happen till you get really up to the high gigahertz. We have none of those in Australia used for telecommunications. You do have them in your car. So some of the sensors in the new cars are using millimeter waves, and no one has a clue. We've been using millimeter waves as a point-to-point, so it's like a rifle shooting for what I call backhaul microwave signals. So Telstra would run cables to their tower. Optus would shoot these millimeter waves onto satellite dishes because they didn't run the cables. Now, those millimeter waves are not so bad if they're not hitting you. They're just going dish to dish, and they don't want to lose the signal. So they've been around since the 70s. But what they're trying to do now is, because I mentioned before, the megahertz and the low gigahertz is now saturated. There's no more bandwidth. And we're bringing out the Internet of Things, We're going to have, these chips in our toasters, our ovens, our fridges, our washing machines. Every gadget in your house will have a two-way RFID chip that will speak directly to a smart meter they're putting on the front of your house or near your box. Now, Victoria is already done. The whole of Victoria has already been rolled out, and they tried to put one in my house about 3 or 4 months ago. Now, I stopped that, and we can talk about it. But this Internet of Things requires all this new data. There's no bandwidth left. So they're going to the higher frequencies, up into the millimeter wave frequencies, because they have no choice. That's all that's left. So when you hear 5G, technically, if you're talking about millimeter waves, for telecommunications in today, there is none or very little. But 5G technology, whether it's beamforming, all these new phase antennas, these new technology is available to be used on all the other frequencies we have. So Telstra is going to get rid of 3G and then use all those frequencies for the 5G technology minus the millimeter waves. So it gets a little confusing, but fifth generation technology is not the 5 gigahertz on your Wi-Fi.
And the Internet of Things is just an expression for making everything interconnected, isn't it?
Correct. It's machines talking to machines. We're rolling out a new system of governance. So we've been on a governance of a central banking kind of debt slavery model where everyone's on the mouse wheel just trying to make ends meet and pay off the mortgage, and maybe when I get to 70 I'll be able to actually go on a holiday. And we're moving from that, because there's too much debt in the world, to what they call technocracy. So it's a top-down surveillance kind of control system, which kind of China's leading the way with facial recognition. So there's going to be literally trillions of sensors out there monitoring, recording, and processing through artificial intelligence everything we say, everything we do, and we're going to a more surveillance-orientated control system. And you'll find that eventually there'll be no cash, or there'll be a digital cryptocurrency or something like that. So allow the governance system to roll out, they need to connect everything. And that's what they're in the process of doing now. And that's really what's got me mainly concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I've just started reading, it's funny you should mention it, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which is a very interesting book. But Jason, look, I was going to ask you, are you an optimist?
I am.
Good. Me too.
I actually think we're in the best time to be alive ever.
Great.
And I will people get sick and die early? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, they are.
Exactly. And it's going to get a lot more. There's a population called EHS, Electrohypersensitivity. This is a real condition. It's not in their head as many, mainstream psychiatrists claim. It's been well documented and well researched. They are around 1 to maybe 3% of the population. Like a peanut allergy, they're allergic to electricity and all the different artificial frequencies we get through all the technology. So they can't even live in the city. They can't be near it. They can tell you when your mobile phone is on or off. It's a terrible condition. It's like chronic fatigue on steroids. It's really, really awful, and they can't function in this world. I'm expecting, and this is not coming from my prediction, it's really coming from Cruz and some of the quantum doctors, as I call them, that may get up to 10, 15, even 20% in the next 5 to 10 years. Once that happens, everyone's going to blame everything else. It's going to be all the other things that are wrong with the world, climate change, GMOs, Roundup, you name it. There's always a reason they'll try and blame some weird this, weird that. But eventually we can fix this. I know engineers who can fix it tomorrow. It's just going to take a lot of money and a lot of new infrastructure. And I love technology. I'm not giving up my Apple iPhone for anyone. I'm not. but I'm going to manage my exposures by having it in airplane mode, and we can talk through some of the solutions now, because otherwise everyone's going to go and go,
no.
Let's go and
look. It's one thing about. I mean, that's what. Well, we're trying. I think both of us, Jason, are on a mission. It's not a mission from God. I think it's a mission that we've given ourselves, and that is to empower people to take control and make a difference. And I think let's talk about some of those solutions.
All right. So here's my approach. I don't have to outrun the crocodile. I've just got to outrun the guy next to me.
Okay.
So my philosophy is that if I can maintain my mitochondria in a healthy state, and let's be very clear here, 20 years ago, I was staring death in the face. I'm not 20 years, a few years ago, 2015, some doctor said I had 6 months to live. I have reversed nearly all those conditions. I'm still managing 3 of them. I've reversed 17 of those conditions by living in a very highly populated cell phone tower everywhere city. So you can manage this, you can live with it.
Yep.
So I want to give people, you don't have to panic. You can manage this, but I do a lot of things which most people think I'm crazy, including my own family, but they work. So here's what I did to get my mitochondria healthy, because once my mitochondria is healthy, I can withstand these frequencies. I have, the immune system's working properly, all my hormones are working properly, my circadian rhythm is all working properly. If I can do that, then I fortify myself. In fact, I build little mini Faraday cages in my body by producing this low deuterium water that mitochondria make. Remember, water is the best Faraday cage. So if you go to the beach, you want to be in the water, not on the sand if you're next to all these cell towers. So if we get all the water working, our intracellular hydration working well, it's a natural Faraday cage. That's one way I'm not going to get eaten by the crocodile. So what do? I see every sunrise. Now, if I can't actually get to see it directly, no, I live close to the East Coast on the beach, so I can see them every day. I will at least stand outside in the backyard. I mightn't be able to see the sunrise because of the buildings in front of me, but at least I'm getting the natural light frequencies. When I'm doing that, I am barefoot and I'm as naked as possible. Now, if you're down the beach, just put your cozies on, put your swimmers on and wear your bikini. You don't want to embarrass people. But you want to stand there because you want all your body to get these natural frequencies. Just like melanopsin, can be damaged by the artificial frequencies, it can be activated by all the good frequencies.
And you mentioned that melanopsin was produced in the eyes and the surfaces of the skin, the cells in the surface of the skin. So, yes, expose your body to the sun.
And the other good thing about the morning sun, it's a natural sunscreen. So you want to build your sun callus up. So it has about a sunscreen of an F, like about an 8 rating. And you're perfectly designed to live in this planet. So that morning sun gives you the natural sunscreen so you can tolerate more of the stronger UV sun during midday. Now, you don't want to spend all day in the sun because you're going to get burnt unless you've really, really got a strong sun callus. So even now, indigenous people sit under a tree in the middle of the day and they've got jet black skin. So they've got more melanin, which is another word, which is the pigmentation in your skin, to handle most of these sun rays. But even those and animals sit under the tree when it's really hot. So sun is really important. I spend 2 to 6 hours outside every day. I will take my computer outside. I'll run a big long Ethernet cable that you put in your house so I'm not irradiating myself with Wi-Fi, and I'll sit there and work in the sun. So that's number one. The number 2 thing I do is block the artificial frequencies of light. So I'm a bit extravagant because I know how important it is. So when it's really hot, like it is today in Sydney, I will go and put cricket clothes on if I watch the TV. The reason I wear cricket clothes is because the white cricket clothes that I have were designed to block UV sun. That's what they're designed to do. And guess what's coming out of our television? UV kind of frequencies. These blue lights are very close to UV frequencies. So I don't want to destroy the melanopsin in my skin, so I wear fully clothed. And I wear cricket clothes because they're the coolest ones I've got. And then I put on my red blue blocking glasses that block up to 550 nanometers. Right now I'm wearing my daytime ones because I want to be able to see properly. And I don't feel you need to block all of the blue light when you're during the day because there's a hell of a lot of blue light outside. So I'm not one that thinks you've got to wear red glasses all the time when you're inside during the days. Cruz disagrees. So if you're militant, you can actually wear your red ones, but it blurs your vision, and changes colours. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty hard to work with. You never want to wear your red ones when you're driving. I don't know if you've driven at night lately, Ron, but the headlights and the brake lights and the signs, it's insane.
Yes, I have actually made a note of that. Well, I got a new car a little while ago, and I was just really struck by how bright things were. And I actually ended up this was rather silly. I actually lifted the chair in my car to try and get myself up higher so that it wasn't as bright, but it still has struck me how bright it is. Yeah, but go on. Yeah, so these blue blocking lights for when you're sitting in the daytime, and go the blue and the red light blocking lights
so
again.
You've got daytime and nighttime.
Yeah, okay.
So the best daytime ones that I'm wearing is from Blue Tech lenses. Yep. I don't like the ones that are sold that have got coatings or dipping, and there's reasons for that. I'd rather people wear something than nothing. Mm-hmm. It's just that I like these the best, and I wear them during the day, and then at night, first of all, I don't turn many lights on in the house. I have these big red light panels that I use for healing, which we haven't got into, which is the science of photobiomodulation, and I just turn them on. Upstairs. I'm not allowed to do it downstairs because my wife and daughter think I'm nuts. But upstairs, which is kind of my turf, I just put on the red light panel and I have no overhead lights on. Of course, I'm going to watch the footy and the cricket and maybe a movie. I don't watch the news and all the negative stuff, but I'm not going to say I don't watch TV. Of course I do. And I wear my red blue blocking glasses because they block everything up to 550 nanometers. Now, if you want to watch Avatar or David Attenborough's, Earth series, you probably don't want to do it with red glasses because you're not going to see all the beautiful colours. But you can watch a movie quite easily wearing the red ones. So that's the light blocking. The next thing I do, and this is really, really important, I manage my EMF. Mm-hmm. I really manage it diligently. And the only way I can do that is by having a meter. So I have a meter with me and in my car all the time so I can see what's going on, and I can make I'll give you an example. I was at the Mind conference where we didn't meet, but Leslie's conference there
I remember
in the Hilton, and I was watching all the speakers who were standing at the back next to all the glasses, and I was down the very front. And I usually like sitting in the back of the bus, but the reason I didn't sit at the back of that conference is because I knew the cell towers were coming straight through that glass and irradiating the absolute hell out of all those speakers. Mm-hmm. So all the kind of knowledgeables, all the ones we turn to advice, were totally ignorant of that fact. And I showed a couple of them on the last day, and they were just horrified.
But you can also make simple things like your own devices within your home and what you're carrying around with you and what you have in your bedroom.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of control over that.
For your home, you do.
Yep.
You've got to make sure your home is a sanctuary because as soon as you step out of it, if you're in the city areas, you're going to get zapped. Mm-hmm. So, my home is very low EMF. Like you said, I've got everything Ethernet cabled. I've addressed all my dirty electricity by putting a filter on my electrical box as it comes in and a kill switch at night where it turns all the electricity off so the kids can't do anything on their computers. Mm-hmm. I stop all the electricity in the house. The bedrooms have blinds that block out all the light because the street lights are really, really bright now. So you want to block out everything you can. You want to be able to not see your hand when you're in the bedroom because that complete darkness is so important for circadian rhythm, and we talked about melatonin and all those other hormonal reasons. So I do that. The next thing I do is make sure I move. One of the reasons I got sick was I was sitting behind a computer desk building a great company, but I didn't get out. I was in artificial frequencies for 20, 30 years, and that's what poisoned me. And I became sedentary, and I ended up being 155 kilos. Most of that weight was put on by blue light, and we're not going to go through how that works now, but basically blue light makes you fat. Blue light makes you eat more. The reason you have a craving for ice cream at 10 o'clock at night is because all the blue light you're getting from watching TV or the computer screen. People have no idea how important light is. Then
is that because of its effect on leptin?
Partly. It's
we shouldn't digress. We're going to do another show. Jason.
We can get into it. Yeah, we're going to go too long. It's all about melatonin suppression.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That decreases your sensitivity to leptin, increases your hunger. Therefore, you eat more and gain weight.
Yep.
That's the bottom line.
Okay.
The next thing I do is, so the movement is important. You need to move.
Mm-hmm.
You're designed to move. You don't have to exercise, and don't exercise in a gym. Because what are you doing in a gym? You're going under artificial light. You've got another 100 people there with all their phones on, with it, they've got their headphones in, listening to something, all streaming something. There's big televisions that people are watching while they're on the cycle machines. Don't go to the gym. Just do it naturally. Out, in the park, go to the beach, get a personal trainer and do the boxing down by the park. You see, when you go out, don't go to a blue lit gym. I went to a gym 3 days a week trying to lose weight before I knew this new knowledge. Guess what happened to me? And I was getting flogged. I mean, I was kind of sweating. I was doing boxing, all those exercises. It was just killing me. 3 times a week. Guess what? I got fatter because my mitochondria were dysfunctional. And I was putting myself into an environment that made it worse. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't lose weight doing the traditional system.
Mm-hmm.
So I exercise outside now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mainly do movement. I don't do a lot of cardio. I do some cardio. But it's stretching, if you like, yoga, qigong. There's lots of different moving meditation, which is just brilliant for you. So that's really important. Don't forget to take your shoes off when you're outside. That's really, really a must. Now, we talked about water. Because I wasn't making that really good deuterium depleted water, I did supplement my water, and I've been doing that now for 2 years. And one day we'll come out and say low deuterium therapy may be one of the number one healing techniques used for most chronic diseases. But I didn't say that. Someone else told me that.
Mm-hmm.
Made a big difference to me. But if you're healthy, you don't need to buy the water. Water's very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't use it. The other big tip for getting mitochondria really strong is, and I know you're not going to like this, people, but cold thermogenesis. This is the ice baths that the athletes have always used after a marathon. You see them jumping in the ice bath to deal with their inflammation. So cold thermogenesis, getting in the cold, and it could be a cold shower. Now, I don't like cold showers, but I do cold thermogenesis. I do it naturally because the water down the beach will get cold enough. You'd like to get down to about 12, 13 degrees Celsius if you want to do it professionally. But any change in temperature is good.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of putting your body under this intentional stress, isn't it?
It is. But especially we didn't get into halotypes because you wanted 101 mitochondria.
No, don't go there now, Jason. I've got to pull you up on that because I'd love to hear about it, but we're going to do it.
Breath work.
Okay.
We believe it or not, most people don't have enough carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do cover breathing, and we've done a program on Wim Hof with Professor Mark Cohen. But go on, tell us about breath work.
So I'm not a big fan of Wim Hof's breathing method. Buteyko is probably my preferred one.
I love Buteyko. I love that.
Buteyko is a version of that. So I had the second highest, second worst classification of sleep apnea. at least in New South Wales. So I've been dealing with that problem, and it's all about carbon dioxide. It's not about getting more oxygen. And yeah, I've been using a version of Buteyko, a little bit different, but along those lines, it's had dramatic improvement in that condition of mine. And most people who get a sleep apnea machine can never give it up. And there's lots of reasons for that, but that's another show. Mm-hmm. And then the one thing I want to mention about food, I haven't mentioned food once. Why is that?
Go on, tell me. Rhetorical question. You're going to answer it.
If your vitamin D level is normal or slightly elevated, you don't need to worry about food.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's a big statement.
That's a very big statement, and it's a statement you're making just almost towards the end of our chat, which almost guarantees you a return invitation. Congratulations, Jason. You've been...
But there's one food advice I want to talk about, and that's called DHA, which is an omega-3 fatty acid that we've had and been using in our body for nearly ever. It's never changed in the history of our biology. It's chronically absent because of the damage done by the artificial frequencies, particularly blue light. It destroys DHA. DHA is incredibly important for cell membranes. And if everyone knows, the importance of cell membranes, and I'm sure your audience does, it's critical. So to maintain all the cell signaling and all the processing, you need lots of DHA, and that's why I love oysters and natural oysters that haven't been cooked, because they are the best source of not only DHA, but all the marine minerals that we lack: selenium, iodine, bioavailable copper. Everyone forgets about bioavailable copper. So that's why I eat 3 dozen oysters a week to build up my DHA that was chronically destroyed from all these artificial frequencies. So that, in a nutshell, is what I've done, not only to make myself resilient against all these frequencies, but to reverse 20 chronic diseases. It's been quite a remarkable journey. And I hope your audience enjoyed it.
Well, Jason, we've covered so many parts there. And look, I often ask my guest, you've answered so many of them, but I'm going to ask you again. We're all on this health journey together, just taking a step back from your role in your professional role. What do you think the biggest challenge is now for people on that health journey? I mean, you've mentioned so many things, but what's the big one? What do you think's...
The big one is the frequencies have changed so dramatically in our environment. And I don't want to be facetious here, but everyone's whinging about, carbon dioxide doubling. Guess how much the electromagnetic fields have increased in the last few decades? 1 quintillion time. What is that in English?
Wow.
That's 10 with 18 zeros.
Wow.
That's why food, one of your members of your ACNM has approached me to help her because everything she's done that has worked so well for so long is no longer working. And the reason it's not working is our environment has changed so dramatically, and we haven't seen it because it's invisible. It's not just the EMF, it's also the blue light. That is now the number one challenge. And if we don't address foundational health, nothing's going to work.
Jason, that's a hell of a note to finish on, but thank you so much for sharing with us your wisdom and your experience, and we are definitely going to get you back because there's so much more to talk about. But thank you, and we're going to have links to, you mentioned that book that you've written, and we're going to have links to your website and that meter and the books. There's so much we'll have links to on this show. And it's such an important topic that we really have to nail this. We have to get on top of it. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, a lot to think about, and there's no doubt I'm going to get Jason back to talk more about some of the issues we touched on today. He has a special offer, In the Dark, the book, which will be a free download. We'll have the links to that on our show notes and also links to Jason's site. I would encourage you to have another listen to this podcast because it's a big and challenging subject. I know when I first heard this side of healthcare, which I had to give some thought to. I went back and listened to it again as well. Not today's conversation, but other conversations that led me to Jason. So I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to leave I've got to remind you always, do leave a review on iTunes. I want to push this podcast up to where I believe it deserves to be, with some very important health messages about holistic approach to our health and our planet, because the two, as we all know, are inseparable. So until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she